Welcome to Trial Site News Podcast Series. Today, we introduce a startup serving the clinical research sector called BEKHealth. Now, BEKHealth was founded by Jason Baumgartner, and Jason, a graduate from Duke University, has established a successful career in the world of clinical trials and drug development. And with BEKHealth Corporation, the startup positions itself in the market, its advanced solutions working with health systems and their electronic medical records to support and facilitate clinical research. So, Jason, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
The pleasure is ours. Now, Jason, can you tell us a little bit about your background? Where did you grow up, attend high school, and how did you find your way to Duke Business School?
Sure. Well, I actually grew up in central Pennsylvania in a town called Altoona. In a town like Altoona, there's three things that matter: sports, sports, and sports. So my dad built a basketball hoop for me in the backyard, and me and my buddies would shovel the court in the winter to make sure we could continue to play basketball. After graduating college with a bachelor degree, I made my way to Connecticut to work for a genomics-based company. Was able to work with some of the really smartest scientists at the time from Yale and Harvard. And they really gave me the confidence, quite honestly, to seek an advanced degree. And it was either, do I go and get a PhD or do I go and do an MBA? And at that time, it was about the time of the web bubble when, MBA students were getting plucked out after 6 months and making $150,000. So I thought, man, why don't I go and take that course, combine an MBA with a business degree? And I was fortunate to get into Duke, which for me was a great accomplishment, given my background.
Now, speaking of, you do have an interesting background. You worked for vendors serving the pharmaceutical industry, including one of the world's largest CROs. So how was that experience? How did it shape your understanding of what services and products pharmaceutical companies need to improve drug development?
Right. So in terms of shaping my own career, but also shaping my understanding, how working with Quintiles shaped my career was having significant amount of mentors who taught me firsthand how to navigate a very large organization, right? When you work for an organization like Quintiles, no single person makes any single decision, even the CEO, right? So when you're a director, as I was, you need to be able to bring on board 10 to 15 different people through both work ethic, empathy, and lots of negotiation with them to bring anything forward. So I think the biggest thing I drew personally from Quintiles was leadership. In terms of what I learned about what the market is looking for, I was fortunate to work with the CEO on many large deals. And in these large deals, what the major biopharmaceutical companies are looking for is end-to-end solutions, right? Can you offer, for example, can you do all of my drug development? We'd like to outsource all of our drug development to you. That being said, they need to understand what are the actual economic incentives and what value are they going to be getting from providing that deal to you. So it's a bit of a high stakes game where you're doing very high deals, very big deals, but very big deals that need to have significant impact on the other organization that ultimately moves their stock price.
Now, you left Quintiles, which is now IQVIA, in 2014 and launched BEKHealth in 2017 after spending a couple of years at Shift Analytics. What were your key learnings at that company?
Right. So I left Quintiles because I really saw the world of data and automation happening, and Shift was a leader in that space. The one key learning I think we all learned, and I hopefully had a great influence over this, is that to enact change into a biopharmaceutical company, to a CRO, to a health system, they require partners, and not like strategic partners. They require thought partners. In the world of technology, we call that customer success, right? So when we show up and we pitch an engagement to a very large pharmaceutical company, we need to bring a team of people that are considered their peers. They need to understand healthcare. They need to understand disease areas. They need to understand data to the level they understand data. Because, the best technology is not going to sell itself, right? So if you're going to be installing, developing, and then ultimately rolling out technology like we did at Shift, you need folks with consulting backgrounds. You need folks that have a deep understanding of healthcare. And I think that, learning that to understand that we need to offer that sort of hands-on customer service was one of the reasons that the company was able to do what it did.
Now, since you started BEKHealth, what are the most prominent changes or emerging themes in clinical research since the formation of your startup?
So I'm fortunate to have insight in constant communication with executives at CROs, sponsors, and sites. And the one thing I'll say that's changed with CROs and sponsors just in the past year is that they definitely recognize the need, that they need to do more to help the actual research site. Meaning they need to understand what is happening really inside a medical institution that is both facilitating and prohibiting research. And they're much more willing to explore and invest in technologies that actually go so deep as to help the clinical research coordinator do his or her job, right? So compare that to a couple years ago where there was a very distinguished cutoff between what a CRO does and what a sponsor does and what's happening on the ground in an actual medical center. So the difference I'm seeing today is there's a much greater emphasis on getting to the patient. How do we help clinical trial coordinators recruit patients more effectively?
So then let's talk a little bit about how the pandemic has impacted the industry. Now, obviously, COVID-19 has had a profound impact on clinical research. Can you share with our audience the three biggest challenges as you see it, and then the three biggest opportunities moving forward in the era of COVID-19 and post-COVID-19?
I'm going to, right now, what we're seeing is the biggest challenge with COVID is what we would describe as clinical research capacity, right? And so what I mean by that is if you kind of scrape everything away about the clinical research industry, the most important asset in clinical research is the clinical research team, which is primarily made up of the clinical research coordinators, right? So the clinical research coordinators today, they may be in, I was talking to one the other day who is in the disease area of ophthalmology, but she's been pulled into COVID studies. So she's been pulled into COVID studies and she's challenged to keep up with the pre-screening and recruitment of her ophthalmology studies. And we're seeing that even in oncology. You see even major cancer centers take parts of their oncology wing and they move them and they're reconfiguring them for COVID patients, right? So I think the one biggest challenge right now that we're seeing is coordinator capacity. Can they pre-screen patients? Can they screen patients? Can they enroll the patient? Can they keep the patient on study drug? Because what's happening in the industry in general is we're increasing clinical trials 20% per year, right? So there's this massive influx of clinical trials that, as we know, are becoming more complex, but we're not really doing much to improve the capacity of the coordinator to do his or her job. So the opportunity there, it's a little bit self-serving, and I'm not going to start promoting BEKHealth yet, but I'll make it a more broader statement, is that the opportunity exists for my biopharmaceutical sponsor friends, my CRO friends, to spend a little bit of their time, a little bit of their money to understand what is the workflow within a medical center, right? What is the workflow? What's working? What's not working? What's inhibiting the flow of patients from a pre-screening and recruitment perspective? And how do we create or provide solutions to the research site that alleviates the manual effort so that they can spend more time recruiting and enrolling patients and less time doing manual things? To me, I mean, I could come up with 3 more, but to me, like, it's all about what is the core issue. And right now we see that as the core issue.
Let's shift gears then to BEKHealth. We know that patient recruitment and enrollment has always been a challenge, and that you are working on ways to leverage electronic medical records to streamline the process of recruitment. Can you speak in more detail about the solutions you are developing and whether BEKHealth is more of a traditional service, a software-enabled service, or software product?
Yeah, why don't I talked about patient recruitment and enrollment for 15 years as a consultant, we talked about 6 years of those at Quintiles. I by chance went to a happy hour with some ex-colleagues that were working at the Smilo Cancer Center 4 years ago. Some of them were research coordinators. Some of them were heads of departments that ultimately oversaw research. And I was just sort of, we were having a couple beers, and they were talking about how recruitment happened, and they were describing their work day. And that what they were saying was that, well, a patient came in, a doctor texted them, say, hey, this patient came in, can you see if there's a study available for them? And then they went on to explain to me that they went into an office, like an office, they went into a room, right? And they spread all the protocols out across a big giant table, and 3 or 4 of them were standing there trying to mind map these 40 or 50 criteria against the patient's EMR. And that's when expletive went off in my mind. I'm like, I need to start a company because this is insane. Like, this is the core issue with patient recruitment, is this fact that we're asking these individuals to do something that's practically impossible, right? If you've looked at the inclusion-exclusion criteria of, for example, a cancer study, there's at least 40 criteria in them that have time dimensions, that have medication histories, comorbid conditions. So what is BEKHealth's core solution? What our core solution is we rapidly identify protocol eligible patients at the point of care real time with precision of 95%. So that all that manual effort I talked about can be alleviated through our solution. Now, if I dive a little bit deeper, how do we enable that? There's 3 things. There's 3 core integrated products. One is what we call EMR Translate. Without getting too geeky, essentially what that does is we're able to access both raw, structured, and unstructured EMR data, and leveraging an AI platform that we've developed that includes over 23 million medical terms, we're able to make that EMR data much more relevant to clinical trials, right? That's the first part. You got to stage and standardize the data in a way that's readable and makes sense. But then on top of that, what we say is that we provide a workflow solution to the research sites so they can rapidly and precisely run a trial feasibility that is 90% accurate. So that when a trial comes in, they can have a true patient count across all dimensions of the protocol, so that when they take on a trial, they know that they have a high probability of recruiting for it, right? That's doing better, bringing trials in. And then the final part, and this is where we're distinguished is that going the last mile, right? Not only do we stop at feasibility, because there's a lot of companies that stop at feasibility, which is fine. That's a good model. But we need to then identify the patients. So then we deploy what we call BEKHealth Auto Recruiter. It's a workflow solution that coordinators, PIs have access to that is updated nightly from the EMR. And it identifies the patients who are protocol eligible, we call them, based on the trials that they are running at their center, right? And also we provide some alerting features so that the coordinators can then communicate to the providers and the nurses even ahead of the patient visit that that patient is eligible for a trial. And that is the sort of holistic way we're going about improving recruitment.
So how big do you see BEKHealth Market? What are the key drivers to realize that market potential?
So we estimate the market to be $2 billion, right? And the way we go about calculating the size of the market is based on the number of sites, the number of trials, and the way we price our solution on a site trial basis. And that, it sounds a little absurd, for me to say 2 billion, but I've had multiple VCs who've looked around, the market and consider it to be that's about right. The key drivers for us at the moment, one is market adoption. We are trying to obviously grab as much market share as we can as possible, which to us is how many research sites, how many research sites are we installed in, right? That's important to us. That creates power, that creates leverage. How many partnerships are we in? Going back to learning about the question about shift, one of the things I've learned from there that I didn't talk about was creating partnerships where you can create a force multiplier effect with the partnership is really a way to accelerate the business. And we have ongoing conversations with them, with multiple partners. And, I think we just, and I think I just mentioned this, is we need to continue to hire A+ individuals who care about healthcare, who have excellence, who have a commitment to excellence of operation, who, and when we look for people, we look for individuals who have a technical background, a healthcare background, and an acumen towards engaging with customers. We like to get our engineers even on the phone with customers because we feel like if we can engage customers in a more holistic way, that gives us a competitive advantage.
So to summarize then, what is the key value proposition the company solution offer?
Ultimately, what matters to us and our customers is, can we identify and enroll patients faster? That's it. And if we can enroll patients faster, that means for a biopharmaceutical company, their development timeline is shorter, their time to market is faster. For a patient with cancer and Alzheimer's and MS, that means that they may be able to extend their life, right? For a CRO, that means that they can eat into their backlog faster. For a site, that means that they could perhaps take on more trials, do it in a more cost-effective way while saving money and also increasing their bottom line in terms of revenue. But ultimately, our metric, which I really like, is very clear. Are we actually enrolling patients faster?
Could you tell us then, how is the company doing? How are the customer developments coming along? And what sort of challenges do you see to grow the company in this current environment?
Yeah, we're doing great right now. Quite honestly, when you're in a startup where it's a little over 3.5 years old, there were times, I'd say 1.5 years ago, I wondered if we were going to exist, right? Like it's not there's very few examples, I think, of upward trends where it just starts and it's great and then you keep going. I think that's, more of like the Facebook story. But right now, our implementations and our pipeline is far beyond what I could have imagined this year. We're at least 300% above our key metrics in terms of how many sites we're going to be expected to be deployed in, our financials, but also what is very promising for us right now is we have 3 very late stage strategic opportunities with very large public companies who see us as a core driver to the research business, right? And not only does that have a positive impact on us as a business in terms of growth and momentum and validation, but it also has a positive impact on our business in order to our ability to ultimately help patients. I would say, we just signed a deal with an organization that an academic or an ACO that has 400 practices. So imagine the amount of research we're going to be able to bring to that ACO across 400 practices that is currently research naive. We're so excited about that. And we're going to do it in a way that that no other organization has done it, because we're going to be able to do it as one entity, not practice by practice by practice like a lot of organizations have done in the past. We're also in very deep conversations with a large data provider that would provide us access to tens of thousands of community-based doctors that we would potentially be able to enable research in areas of the country where research isn't really available today. So I'm really excited where we are. I tell some folks, as the difference between a VP and a CEO is, a CEO, you're never really happy, right? Like you're happy, but you're a little bit annoyed, right? But I'm going to feel pretty good if we come out of this year, where I think we're going to be, and quite honestly, having the impact we're going to have on bringing, CNS trials, cancer trials, rare disease trials to areas of the country that don't have access to trials. So that's going to be really exciting, just for me to be able to tell my kids that's what we're doing.
So what's your planned growth model then? Will you seek to grow organically via sales, or will you seek venture capital or other options?
We just closed, that's a good question. We just closed the pre-seed round. So we're going to sit on that for likely 2 or 3 months. And we do have an option right now, or a couple options right now, for strategic investment from commercialization partners, which is my preference. Obviously, with some of the momentum we're having in the market, we are getting more inbound VCs, but that's not something we're looking at right now. Our model is actually relatively lean. Our product install is differentiated because it has a very low requirement for install. And our financials and our margins are very attractive at a very low number of units. So, I've been advised, and I've thought a little bit about sort of my background and how I've, always sort of, haven't necessarily taken on too much and dug a little deeper before raising a larger round. But to answer your question directly is, we're gonna see how the next 3 or 4 months play out to see if we actually need venture money. Right now, we don't really have a plan for it, and I think we're likely going to be able to reach a growth trajectory without it.
So before I let you go today, what are some key takeaways you would like the trial site network to have about BEKHealth?
Well, the first thing I'd want to say is BEKHealth was designed by researchers for researchers, right? Which I think isn't always common, right? I think a lot of things are designed by executives that think it's good for researchers. So we truly built the company, and have built the company, and are continue to build the company to work and help research organizations run more efficiently. And the other thing I'd want to know, just to make sure people understand, implementation requirements for something like BEKHealth, because this is the question we always get, right? Well, how long does it take to implement? What are the requirements? In most cases, the implementation requirements on a site is no more than 2 hours, right? So we're not talking about some massive install. We know that we can't put IT burden on the site. So we take on almost all the IT burden. We go above and beyond HIPAA compliance requirements. Implementation is lean, and the product really works to ultimately help patients. So, if you're an organization that, those things matter to you, we'd love to hear from you. And I guess the last thing I'd like to say to your network is, I appreciate all the work they do. It wasn't only till I started BEKHealth that I really appreciate, how important the research community is to clinical development. So I'd like to end by saying thank you.
Well, Jason, we want to thank you for taking the time. We know you're busy, and we're glad you got to come on with us today, and it's been a real pleasure. And we wish you all the best.
Yeah, thank you. Talk soon.